in the realm of bringing it back to today again, and to return a little bit full circle to where I began our conversation with thinking about um, this tradition of relating to the story in a modern way. It's a story that has become a trope that is almost universally understood. That the Jewish people finding freedom from slavery, Moses triumphing in the end. These are an archetype at this point. The Hebrew word for Egypt is Mitzrayim, which is a narrow place, and that's the derivation of that word. And we think of traveling from narrowness to liberation to redemption. In any number of ways, we're still feeling narrowness and seeing hardship in the modern world. Michael Walzer notably wrote in Exodus and Revolution, wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt. There's a better place, a promised land. The winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness. So as we think again about the last year and where we're sitting today with a glimpse of the future accessible to us, what is that modern wilderness, and what does promised land mean and look like to you? And let's start with Dean Soni and go from there.
Well, sort of continuing on with the theme, to me, Promised Land is a return back to tribe, a return back to belonging. It's been really hard to be apart. We're not wired to be apart. We're wired to be together. We're tribal people. You know, the history of humanity is the history of family, of clan, of kin, of tribe, of community. And there is no more extraordinary community, in my opinion, than the USC community, a community that represents 150 different countries, all 50 states, and every spiritual and philosophical perspective that's ever been articulated. That's part of the solution to the world's great crisis. And we miss that. Everything we do at USC is predicated on being together, from patient care to teaching to mentoring to athletics to creative expression to residential life to community service and civic engagement. It all requires us to be in person. And so for me, the promised land is being back together. It's being in tribe. It's being able to see each other again in each other's experiences and to not take each other for granted ever again.
I'd love to jump in, and I want to say I just do want to say how much I am loving hearing all of you talk, and it is inspirational to me. Varun, you always almost bring me to tears with the beauty of your ideas, and in a good way, in a very wonderful way. You know, when I think of Promised Land, what came to me this time was the beloved community from MLK, because this whole period is very tied for me, I think, like it is for all of us, with this blending of what's going on in the pandemic, the inequalities, the justice call, the cries for that came out this summer, and the continuing aspiration to build the community we really believe in. And so I keep seeing those as having very much similarity. And when you think about what the desert is, it's the opposite of the promised land, the opposite of the beloved community. It's a place where we don't have justice, we don't have equity, we don't have empathy or care for fellow human beings, and the humanity, the things that you've all talked about, it's that. And I'm really interested to hear Sara and Nicole, because I'd love to hear from your perspective where you are in life, what that says to you. But it seems very important. And I guess I feel like we may actually make much more progress towards that if we come out of this in a stronger, better way. And that would be something that would have, ramifications all the way across the globe. So that's what brings us back to hope.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue on that dialogue, just in terms of the concept of, this narrowness versus this promised land. I also, similarly, just as a college student going through the pandemic and political inequality and racial inequality and so much hardship right now, thought about it similarly to the way that President Folt articulated it, in a sense that, I see the narrowness and kind of this wilderness as this place of mental and physical chaos, as a place of, narrowness and physicality, as Varun Soni was referencing, just in literally being restrained from my peers and from my friends and family. But in terms of just this wilderness versus promised land aspect, I really do think of it as this, this world we're living in right now does have so much inequality and chaos in a sense that I categorize as the wilderness. And when I think of promised land, I was debating, is the promised land the past? Is it like a year ago before the pandemic? I don't think so, because there was still inequality then and there was still hardship. Is the promised land next year? No, because I don't really think everything will be just magically fixed. That's just my realistic perspective in that. And so I think the promised land, in my ideal view, is just this space of mental and physical harmony and of acceptance, and this space of empathy, and I don't know if that's ever a space that can be acquired in its full extent, but I think that's kind of like my ideal hope and dream in terms of the promised land. And I think of it in connection to the Jews and the promised land being Israel, and finally getting there, and there's still hardship there, and there's still inequality and struggling. And so I think, in a simple term, the promised land is just more of a safe and welcoming community, kind of to echo off of that as well.
And going off of what I agree with what all of you have said, the only thing that I have to really add is I kind of wonder, I don't know what the promised land looks like. I have no idea. I don't know if we can ever get there. I hope, in an ideal world, to be happy, healthy, comfortable. And I think that at different points in our lives, we feel that differently. But I also don't know if there's a way to get to that ideal, all-encompassing, perfect place. I think we just really have to work hard to get there. And I think that's going to take work for the rest of our lives to get to a promised land of some sort at certain times, but also being okay for it not to be perfect at all moments, always.
You make me think, just briefly to say one more thing about the promised land. I think maybe it's over my life, I've begun to feel that it's not that I have to have a promised land. The promised land is the process of always trying to achieve it. And in that way, you find those moments of that peace and serenity in the fact that you don't have to get there. You have to be always trying. And that's probably been taking me a long time to have that peace from that thought. And I don't know, Dave, or others of you that have that's a little bit how it feels to me now. And it might not have been the same had you asked me when I was at a different point in my life.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for offering that piece of guidance, because I just think that it really speaks so deeply to just human nature and just positivity and kindness. And it's very uplifting to myself. So I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate it so much.
The journey itself is where the meaning gets made. I think that's so insightful, and I totally agree with this notion. You referenced the beloved community. I think every community has its language for what they're describing, and they know what that means, right? And they know that's what they're trying for. And as someone who was when I tell my story, I sometimes tell it this way, as having been a graduate student at USC and spent a couple of years away from LA, and then having the chance to come back here and do this work. At first I think I was joking with myself. I'm returning to the promised land, right? But the promised land is not the corner of Hoover and Jefferson. The promised land is something about the Trojan family, is something about what it means to be connected, to be striving for something higher, to be linked in a way that isn't connected to just the physical space or to some sort of tangible objective goal. I can already picture myself welcoming our next class of Trojans in August, hopefully in person, and hopefully telling some version of this story about what it means to be part of this place. But it's not about the place, it's about the belonging, as Dean Soni said. And if we're striving for that, then we are on the right path. I want to echo Nicole's thanks to Dr. Folt for being here and for being our partner, for supporting our community, for serving so selflessly the USC community, to Dean Soni, who has been with us through all manner of journey and stayed with us and stood by our side. And most of all, to Sara and Nicole, our community is defined by its successful student leadership. It is what that intangible thing is that we know we have to offer that every other campus probably wishes they had. And it's always an honor to work together. And thank you all for this, and wishing all of you, wherever you are, celebrating this time of year, Chag Sameach, and fight on.
Right on.